that noise? Well, shouldn't you be making cat noises instead?
I can't do the cat noises. I thought I'd try and give I'll try and do the mother's sounds instead.
Mother sound.
Welcome back to 2MoreTakes, everybody. It's just regular plain old 2MoreTakes this time. Wrong. Actually, it's Halloween season, and instead of starting it off with Good Burger like we did, now we're moving back to our roots with this podcast. People might not know this, but our Halloween episode that came out in February was actually recorded around this time last year. So technically speaking, our first topic was sort of zombie movies and sort of Halloween season.
Our production started a year ago, and now we're here.
Yeah, I guess in terms of recording alone rather than publishing, this is the anniversary of our Independence Day. I don't know.
Today we celebrate our spooky day.
My name is Jack.
My name's Joe.
And today we're going to be talking about a very special topic, because we're not just talking about horror films. That'll come later on. We'll talk about
we've got
all sorts. But
we've got a few horror things lined up, haven't we? A couple of episodes stuff. But,
and obviously, I think it's just an annual thing, similar to the summer blockbuster season that we just want to do. I'm content to do it. I'm happy. I'm pumped, especially for today, because I was quite here's the thing. I had only seen bits of one of these films for the longest amount of time, but in terms of subject matter, I'm getting quite interested in the market that's sort of there, and it's one that's existed for a while, about as old as we are, really. I mean, especially the first film we're going to talk about. But I guess in terms of topics today, we're kind of talking about Japanese horror, but we're also extending it to sort of Korean horror. I'd say Asian horror, but that might be too reductionist.
There's one of them's Chinese, no?
No, Korean.
Korean? Oh.
Yes. One of them's South Korean, the other two are Japanese.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know my languages clearly, but...
That's alright.
Yeah, okay.
But yeah, the first film we're talking about actually came out, I believe, the year I was born. I think...
98?
It's 1998. Were you the year after, Joe? Or?
I was the year after, yeah.
Year after, yeah. I thought so. So it's like, oh, this is the setting of this film is like a month before I was born. Oh no. But yeah,
well, as long as it's not a week before you were born.
Yeah, no, we're good. We're good. But yeah, no, it's we're talking about Ring today, the Japanese horror film, also known as Ringu, which, as you might know, is just Ring in Japanese.
Yeah.
So this is the problem. Is today we're kind of talking about a lot of well-known J-horror franchises, and the names are quite confusing. So
this is the
bear
thing.
with us. We'll try to be as clear as we can. Yeah,
this is the thing. When we were looking at it, we were trying to decide which ones we wanted to watch, and we were like, all right, we know a couple of ones that like, oh, we need to watch this, we need to watch this. We look through the list, and it's like, there are 10 different names that are all the same thing, and it's like there are like 20 sequels to some of them, and, it's like, which one is actually the original version of the film?
Well, that's the thing as well, is that the other confusing thing is that going through the lists of these two franchises, especially, obviously we won't talk about the second one yet, but the order of succession is actually incredibly confusing, because the next franchise, I only discovered afterwards that the second film that we watched isn't actually the direct sequel to that film, which we'll get into later. But with this one, it's like... The thing is with the Ring franchise is that you don't just have the American reboots to deal with in terms of continuity. You also have all of the Sadako films that came after,
which apparently aren't
two Sadako films.
I mean, just looking at the titles, they sound like I don't know, some sort of
Sadako 3D.
Yeah, it's like Sadako 3D and Sadako versus someone else, and it's like. It seems like no one cares. I've never heard of these in my life.
They sound like delectable trash.
Yeah, and I've heard some people. Some people said, yeah, they're not worth watching.
No, yeah.
So,
but apparently, and this is for Ring. I guess Joe, would you allow me to sort of introduce Ring properly? Ring is an urban legend horror about a VHS tape that's kind of haunted. It's based on a book where it was sort of more the supernatural elements were more sort of ambiguous with also scientific elements. There's kind of a crossover there. The film is quite clear. Ringu takes the supernatural approach. The tape is kind of cursed, and it spreads a curse onto its victims, where basically once you watch the tape, and a week later you die, basically. The ring girl comes and she kills you somehow. And it's all through sort of technology, which is kind of the weird thing. That it's this mysticism that has like infected itself into modernism, basically, and it's still present. But yeah, so we follow a female reporter who is a mother, and she's also got her sort of ex-husband, and then it's all this sort of shenanigans of them trying to. I say shenanigans, but it's like
they're trying to figure it out.
It's a struggle to try and figure it out. It's more of a mystery with horror sort of tinges in it, really. But it's still a very I think the best thing about Ringu specifically is that once you've watched it. This is the feeling I got afterwards. It was nighttime. It was like 3 a.m. I think, and I was like, "Oh God, in a week is this going to happen to me? Do I need to pass this film on to someone else?" Like,
I'm gonna make a copy.
Apparently, this is not the first Ring film.
Well, no, this is the thing. I saw many things where it's like this is based on The Ring or something.
Yeah.
And I'm like, what? How many rings are there? I couldn't even. The thing we couldn't really find the original. So which one did you see?
Well, so I learned that the original obviously it's based on a book. It's based on several books, but the first one was based on the first book, and that is the one where it takes a very middle ground between supernatural and scientific explanation. In the book, the tape is not just haunted but also infected with smallpox. And that's part of the virus that comes around. It's very convoluted and crazy. I can't comment on it because I haven't read it, but it sounds like amazingly nuts. But there is a made-for-TV movie before Ringu that was on Japanese television that is very not well known. It's not called Ring or Ringu, but it's Ring, and then it has like an additional name on it. It's Japanese. Surprisingly, that's the least convoluted of like the films before the famous one, basically. But Ringu's the famous one from Japan, and then there's The Ring, which is the American reboot.
It came out 2002.
Yes, and it's actually. I mean, I want to talk about obviously Ringu more specifically, but The Ring. I have seen it. I saw it after Ringu. It's actually pretty good.
Yeah, I'll say I'd seen the American Ring before I'd seen any of the rest of these films. Because I'd already seen, The Ring, I was familiar with The Ring. I remembered it being good. But then I watched Ringu, and then I went back and I rewatched a little bit of The Ring the other day, and I was just like, I remember, it's about as good as I remember it being.
Yeah.
Which I still think... The Japanese version is better.
I don't know.
They both have ups and downs to them, so it's a difficult comparison.
I think I like Ringu more, but I definitely think that they're actually kind of comparable in that Ringu does suffer from a lower budget, basically, and that's obviously something that other films on the list can also relate to. But obviously, I think one benefit of The Ring is that being a bigger budget film, the filmmaker was able to do a lot more with the visuals.
Yeah.
Like, the visuals of The Ring are, I would say, a lot better than... and the editing as well is a lot better than the first film. That's not to say that it's bad in the first film, because I actually think that... Well, obviously, in that film, they take a more reserved position because they can't do sort of wacky special effects and all that.
They still do the iconic scene very well. There is one scene that is in both films that is very good.
Oh, yeah. That scene is just fantastic in both. In the original, it's like... it still looks really
Yeah.
good. And then the new one, it has like
They've
there's,
added
like,
to it a
water
little
and
bit.
shit.
Yeah.
It's like great. In fact, that's a whole motif really with
Mm-hmm.
with the reboot is that there's the water basically. That sort of spreads around victims and stuff like that. But yeah, and as well, like, there's a little bit more going on with like the kid actor and that. But I do think
Yeah.
that the relationship between the Japanese couple,
Yeah.
in the Japanese one, that is much better, and it's so much more like
because they
subtle.
they
and
basically
well executed.
they swap out the male character in the Japanese one for they kind of give some of his purpose to the kid in the American one, don't they? Because like,
well, the thing is that in the Japanese one, both like the ex-husband is a sort of, he's kind of got like a psychic connection.
Yeah, he's
and his like big concern is that he didn't want to pass that on to someone else, and that he was like he wasn't ready to be a father, and that's part of why he's kind of cold and absent in his son's life, and why he divorced his wife. Like, he still asks like caring, like courteous questions, like, oh, I see that, like when he goes to first see our protagonist, but like he's like, oh, how's our son and that, and like, is he like doing well at school and stuff, and it's like stuff near and around that, and I think that's part of that is just the film in general, in that it's this episodic. It's kind of, well, both these franchises that we're talking about next to each other are episodic, but this one does it in that it's basically set over a week.
Yeah.
And that is the perfect format for what the lore of the horror is, and it's kind of perfect in its conveyance of that time, in that sometimes a day just comes and goes and nothing happens, but meanwhile that time is always ticking, and eventually that deadline is going to come, and you're going to have to deal with it, and it's this horrible existential like representation of death, basically, and how inescapable it is. Obviously in this film, the escape is that you can escape death by pushing it onto other people, basically, by making I suppose, should we get into spoilers of Ring just briefly, because I think we're nearly at the
people obviously
you
can
obviously
skip
need to
a little bit if they want, but
I've talked quite a bit about it. You should obviously talk a bit about it as well. Sorry, I'm just trying to get through it.
That is the thing.
There's a lot of lore to cover on that.
Yeah, no, the whole story, because I love the fact of how both the American and the Japanese version have their own twist on the story, basically.
Yes.
But the backstory and the depth of, why is this tape cursed, and what's the origin of it. And it's really interesting story of how the character's trying to figure out, where did this tape come from and all of that.
Yeah.
And then it's also the whole thing of figuring out the origin of it, and then how do they help, basically how do they save the person, the ring girl, or what's her name in the Japanese one?
So Sadako. Sadako, and then it's Samara in the American
one. But yeah, they're trying to figure out what happened to her, and to stop her killing them. They're trying to help her.
Yeah. They go into it with a very they go into it with the attitude of, it's like a very old world attitude of, if we help this spirit move on, then this spirit will want to move on. But little do they know that that's not necessarily the case.
Yeah, but that's also the cool twist of it, isn't it? Where they think because she survives after they've found her body, basically found the body of the girl in the well. And it's quite iconic, really, that whole thing. It's very...
I think in both of them as well. I think I prefer the Japanese one, in that, like, when she finally finds the corpse, like she's accidentally ripping off the skin, and there's all that very clear like eye goose that's coming out. The eye goose looks better in the American one, but you see so much less of it because of the way it's filmed.
No, they both have their ups and downs, and then obviously they find the body in the well, and there's that reveal, and then she survives her week, but then
the day they find her body, that's the night she's supposed to die. And so when the clock rolls over, they assume that by like calling the police and finding her body and that being put to rest. Like, oh, they're going to bury her and stuff. They've gotten past it, and that's why she survived.
But then the iconic scene happens where the father dies, and
because he watched the tape a day later.
He's a day behind, and then they figure out, she finally realizes what she did that he didn't do. Make a copy, spread it to someone else. And
then that's one thing I like about the Japanese film, I think, more than the American reboot, is the way that film ends, because it's like, because she's gone through so much. And also, I think I like Naomi Watts. You know, she's great in Twin Peaks: The Return. I think she's actually pretty good in The Ring. But whoever the actress is who plays the journalist, our main character in Ringu, she's fantastic. Like, she gets across the dread and all that so well, and like, you know, she goes through so many she goes through like so many steps of how she feels, and like, you know, times she gives up, but it's like I feel like Naomi Watts' character kind of didn't give up until the end, whereas like she was kind of getting slowly broken down over the time. And then by the end of it, like she there's that, obviously she's like, okay, I need to make my son, because he's also watched the tape. I need to make my son make a copy and then give it to someone else. And so she's on the phone, and her son is staying with her father, the son's grandfather. And she's like, "Hey, Dad, could I ask you? I need a favor from you." And it's like, oh shit, is she gonna give it to her father?
Yeah, and then I guess
as like a sort of like trying to save her son over her father.
And then obviously they might figure out a way to save the father afterwards, try and spread it to someone else.
But it's so ambiguous, and then there's obviously that cloud that comes in from the sky. Yeah. It's really
It has quite a lot of symbolism, and, you know, as you said about the whole time passing and how they spend their time and the days and stuff is
Ringu or Ring. I think it gets it's the most distilled, sort of perfected version of that, I think, in that both of us can agree, because obviously I know that we might. I have a feeling we're not going to agree on the next thing, but the rules are quite clearly outlined, which I think helps both of us.
I think because the American one tries to add more scares, doesn't it? More paranormal stuff as well. It's like they've got the budget. We can add like little bits here and there where we're like,
they try and build up to the horror a bit more with some, because at the beginning, like the dad is like, oh, it's like a weird, odd, like avant-garde student film, and it's got like that ladder that's leaning against the wall, and it's like, there are so many good quirks that I do love about the American one, but again, I think the dad character was a bit, he was a bit dumbed down,
a bit less, because I think again, Naomi Watts is more persistent, and he's less persistent, and then the boy has a little bit more paranormal.
Yeah, I do like how he's a bit like, he's not as quick to believe her in the American one. I understand why the dad in the Japanese one is so quick to believe her. It's because he is a supernatural sort of like paranormal guy. But and then it's just like the relationship that like he has with his student is so much better done in the Japanese one, where it's like it's only indicated that they're in a sexual relationship, whereas like in the American one, it's just like, oh, it's his live-in girlfriend, and they work together, and she's a student where he works or whatever.
Watching the Japanese one, I really enjoyed it, and it was I can see where they're both very similar, but also quite different in little bits here and there. So
both of us like Ring. Is
and I think
both of them as well.
Yeah, both Ring.
I like both of them.
The well-known Ring films, American and Japanese, both very good.
But do you want to introduce our next franchise?
You'll have to go in more depth on this next one, because this is the thing with this one, right? So we knew we wanted to look at The Grudge. But we went back to the original stuff, and it's the originals that we could get our hands on were Ju-on the Curse, and then Ju-on the Grudge, which are some of the original of the where the Grudge originated. We found versions of them to watch, but they are very different from, like as you said, we got you said that Ringu was kind of low budget, which it is. It's it's
but it
it
definitely
still
has a higher
has
budget
a
than the
budget.
first film in this thing.
Yeah, these ones are very, as you said, the Curse is almost student film-esque because of how it is. It's. I found it quite difficult to watch The Curse. It was. I'll be honest. I got a little bit bored at the beginning section of it because
this was the one that we got the most hints. Well, at least I got the most hints about what you felt like.
Yeah, I know because you were not sure whether we were like, oh, do we watch both of them? And I was like, I'd already watched both of them by this point, and I said to you, yeah, it's you may as well watch both. They're not that long, at least. It's like
that's one thing I really like about the first one is that it's literally just 70 minutes. And if you watch the fan edit, which we haven't, but because this is the other thing is that the Grudge.
Yeah.
So I guess we should, because I guess it wasn't specifically said. This is the Ju-On franchise, but more specifically the Curse and the Grudge.
Yeah.
So because obviously the Grudge is the simplified American version. The Grudge was just the name of the most popular and the first proper film production of the Ju-On franchise that got made. Because the Ju-On the Curse was straight to DVD, and Ju-On the Curse 2, which comes in between Ju-On the Curse 1 and Ju-On the Grudge, which we didn't watch.
No.
But apparently, Ju-On the Curse 2 it's either 30 or 40 minutes of reused footage from Ju-On the Curse 1. So it's a Silent Night, Deadly Night 2 situation.
Yeah.
But apparently, so that fan edit we were looking at, that we didn't watch, that includes that merges it so that it's basically just one film, and it's just a feature length, nearly 2 hour long film, which is probably how I will watch it when I go and back and watch it. But yeah, I think this is a polar opposite thing with this one, because I thoroughly enjoyed the two Ju-On films that we watched. I was really on board for these. I didn't find them boring whatsoever. I will admit to one thing. I found the in the Grudge there were moments where I thought, okay, let's speed it along here. We don't need to be taking as much with this.
That's the thing I had with both of them. There were bits here and there where it's there's a lot of one thing I found really weird about them was it would go from, because I love this thing, all the films we watched have this kind of theme where it's it's all about horror's all about the rumor of, oh, did you hear this story about what happens, and it's and then it happens, and then someone else is like, oh, did you hear this story about what happened to these people? But I think it was the Curse in particular where I was like, oh, look, there's someone. I think it was the Curse where it's someone talking about, oh, this is a thing, this rumor of something happening, and then it happens to them, and then it's the next scene was a new character talking about this rumor about something that happens, and then it happened. I think the Ring did it. But
no, I'm trying to. Yeah, because I was going to say the Ring does it in its very first scene. So I'm trying to think. I think that there was that instance, but I'm trying to think of what specific segment it was, because I will actually say that I like I think I like the Curse more than the Grudge, but that's not to say that I dislike the Grudge.
No,
because the Curse kind of doesn't hold your hand. It kind of lets you piece things together, and it's also not so abstract that you don't get it. By the end of the film, I was like, oh shit, I get it. And it's
yeah, that's the thing. I think the Curse on its own is, it's very simple, but again, it just has, there definitely, I think, in the middle there's sections where it's oh, here's these characters, and they're oh, where's this character? And then there's a character who's oh, these characters. It's just, there's a lot of characters that are introduced, and I'm they're not actually doing much, they're just existing, looking for other characters, and there were definitely some bits.
I'm gonna be honest. I think the Grudge was the biggest sinner.
The Grudge, I think I was say, has that as well, but also doesn't make sense sometimes.
Well,
it has scenes that just leave you on a.
Okay.
So what happened?
So Joe, I need to set this up right. So
go ahead.
I've recently watched the entirety of Twin Peaks, so I'm ready for this, baby. Okay, yep. I am already in the we're doing abstract explanations of fairly fairly simple concepts, but they're maybe not conveyed in a clear way. And especially when it comes to the lore of Ju-on, that isn't conveyed in a clear way, especially in the second film. In the first film, it's kind of purposefully done, because that reveal at the end with the final segment with the teacher, who's our only sort of reoccurring character, basically. He like that was like, I think that section was perfect. I do think that the thing is with like one thing I felt like with the curse that set it made it a bit more sort of coherent in its sections was that, despite the fact that in the Grudge we have kind of a protagonist, which is Rika,
kind of,
because she's sort of the main character of 3 segments. Although the end segment in that film, I didn't know when that took place, because I read, because there was a moment in one of the segments after she sort of had that second segment about her, where it said that like I said on the news when it was the dad's daughter all grown up, it said, Rika has been found, she was presumed missing and stuff. So I didn't know whether or not she had survived the second encounter, or I guess she did, because it's meant to be after the fact. But I mean, that's more the specifics, and that's more the issues of like in the Grudge. There's like in the Curse, the differences with how the characters are linked is that there are quite clearly 2 sort of instances of time. Basically, there is the past, like when it's the teacher and that family, and then the mother who sort of, and I guess we'll get into spoilers because you kind of have to with this one. The mother of the child Toshio, the mother Kayako, both of these characters are integral to the Ju-on franchise. So Kayako and Toshio. Kayako is a wife to this guy, just a regular guy, and she's in love with the teacher character that we meet in The Curse, who is married to a different woman. It is implied that he has relations with Kayako at some point, that they were like dating or something, and that he is actually Toshio's father, Toshio being the weird boy with sort of scabs on his knees that he sort of like itches and scratches at. Toshio's a weird kid, but he's sort of like, he's kind of an innocent caught in the crossfire of this this sort of this obsession of the mother, who really is not, like, she didn't do anything wrong. She was just in love with a different man, and the father decided to go, like full, like serial killer basically, and go on a sort of rampage. But that's the first instance in The Curse of what happens, and then after that, a new family moves in, and then we follow the story of this family, but from different perspectives. So we follow to begin with, it's the tutor who's teaching the daughter Kano, and I remember her name just because of the scene she was in that I absolutely adored, but I don't think you'll adore because of the effects. But and then there's her brother, I think, Tsushio, I think, or something. And then their mum is basically, she's away for a little while, but I think the tutor is called Yuki. I'm not certain. There's so many names.
I know,
that
this
it's
is
really
one
hard
thing.
to keep track
This is
of.
where I had trouble. Where I'm like, I couldn't tell who was student, who was teacher, who was what half the time, and I'm like, it's figuring out certain plot things did get missed for me because I'm like, I can't quite work out who's who. But
well, I think that's a bigger issue in The Grudge, just because there's significantly more characters, whereas there's only maybe like 5 or 6 accounts in The Curse, and I actually think it does balance its cast quite well, because as soon as you like we hear about Tsuyushi's girlfriend, and then we meet her immediately after in the next segment, but he's not around, he's gone missing, and then we have the section that's kind of completely isolated, but we get more context that that she, like, she's at school and this is still affecting her and stuff like that. And then afterwards we get the segment with Kano, where her mum comes back, but before that we get the reveal that her friend, who also feeds the rabbits with her at school because that's part of her duties, her body is turned up in a horrible state, and Kano's jaw is the only piece of her that's been recovered. And then later we find out that Kano's corpse has walked home as a zombie, as a sort of ghost, because it is a ghost, because obviously everyone's a ghost, but there's zombie ghosts that appear like zombies, and that walk she does. That walk she does is so it's such a great physical performance.
I did love, one thing I did love was especially even with both films, when you actually get to the horror elements with basically mixture of just creepy and contorted people, especially walking up and down that one staircase in particular.
Oh yeah, that as well. The front door step area is like that's just where everything bad happens. It's
either there or the ceiling. So
yeah, the ceiling is like my favorite place in the film. It's like it doesn't matter how much you can anticipate the horror that might occur. The chances are it will occur. Unlike Ringu, in Ring there are quite clearly established rules that allow you to be understand the horror tangibly, and also it gives you a defense against it. Like you can actually beat the curse, but in a very particular way, so that you can save your own life. In the Ju-On franchise, if you walk into that house, you are fucked. It does not matter who you are. It does not matter where you are. If you have come into contact with that house. Or people from that house, and it's just long enough, you are dead meat. It's very nihilistic it is the I think how I said that Ring is an analogy for death. Ju-On is the perfect analogy for death, and that you cannot escape it. But and this is where the nihilism doesn't totally sort of come through, there are bits of hope, especially in the Grudge. In the Curse, there's no hope, but in the Grudge, there is hope, because there are two different things that are established that are not necessarily... This might be something you missed out on, because this is something I kind of missed out on. I thought about it afterwards, but it's also a similar thing with Twin Peaks, is that in Twin Peaks... Fire Walk With Me, which is the movie that came out afterwards, but is a prequel. There is something in that film where basically I won't spoil the plot, but somebody dies, but beforehand a ring is thrown to them, and the ring has a symbol on it, and the ring is supposedly for their protection, but they still die anyway. But and when you watch that without the information that it's for the protection of this person, basically the person killing them wants to possess their soul, but by them putting on the ring, they can't be possessed. So they can only be... So basically, by being murdered, it's the best outcome for them, rather than them being possessed. Which is dour, but there's a bit of hope that sort of shines through that. In The Grudge, the father who's a retired policeman, there's time travel shenanigans that sort of go on between him and his daughter in the future. Which I like how weird that was, but when I first saw it, I was like, what the fuck is going on? That was really like confusing, but like basically he comes back, and he's the only ghost that comes back that doesn't hurt some like people in his life that he loves. And that's because he died caring about his daughter and trying to save her. And basically, when he comes back, he manages to sort of save her soul, and the two of them, they do both die, but they don't turn into part of the Grudge, basically. They don't get contaminated with the curse. And that's one of the rays of hope. The other ray of hope is that you can sort of defend yourself against being part of the curse, but by being basically you can stop yourself being killed by Kayako by putting your hands over your eyes, like Rika does in the end of the film. However, again, that's only so that you can die in a slightly better way, basically. Of that, she dies at the hands of someone who is not a part of the Grudge, which is the spirit of the serial killer father. But I don't think she comes back as a member of the Grudge, basically. Whereas Kayako and Toshio are the prime sort of members, but even the Japanese schoolgirls, they come back as the sort of zombies and that. It's like other people get weaponized essentially in this lore. You can do things to basically stop yourself being made into a part of this curse, and it's something I thought about from the very get-go, is that, well, if you die with love in your heart, do you still become part of the Grudge? And apparently that's not the case, which is, I think, a good thing. I do think that it could be off-putting for some people, because it's like, well, you kind of... I think some people want to have that solution that the characters can find, and they can escape their fates, even if in like the post-credit scene or whatever, they still die. It's like... People like to have that hope, whereas in Ju-On, there's no hope of survival, but there is hope of how you use that time, similar to Ringu.
Yeah, I always love... I did like the whole thing of, there's always a lingering... this next, everyone's dead, and the character who survived, they're gonna die later on, but not yet. Yeah. And it's like, I do like the lingering. There's just always that fear of, it's gonna happen at some point. You just never know when. Even if the film ends, they're not safe. So, but yeah, I found. I just want to summarize my thoughts on those two real quick. But yeah, I found the plots and the characters a little bit hard to follow, and I did lose interest here and there because it was low. Especially the first one was simple enough to follow, but both of them, because the second one tried to go more advanced, but it was still really low budget. Really, it was difficult to follow some stuff. And I liked the horror was limited, but when it was there, when they actually did stuff, it was very, very good, and I could see how it was even these films quite iconic for the horror and bits that they take into future films. And again, I was going to say bits from this and The Ring that they've got creepy girls contorting through places. And the only thing I thought of other than that was The Exorcist, which came way before these films. Yes. That obviously is known for having a contorted girl. So,
well, especially Samara in The Ring looks very similar to Reagan, possessed Reagan.
Yeah. So there's this trending theme of scary girls moving weirdly.
Scary girls with long hair.
Yeah, long hair, cover their face, and just weird. I love
how Sadako looks in the Japanese Ring.
The Japanese one looks very good.
Her eyeballs are so they are horrible, and then in this one, Kayako is just like that performance by the actor who did it. She was the same actor who played that role for several films, but going into both The Curse 2 and The Grudge, and I think The Grudge 2 as well. I don't know if she came back after that, but also apparently The Grudge 2 is very good. Apparently it condenses it to a single cast of characters. Where they flesh them out a bit more.
Yeah, there's so much that I'm curious to check out sequels to all these films, to be honest.
The Grudge, the American one, I do have thoughts on that, but it's not like it's basically just Ju-on again. But it's like, okay, this is the thing. The reason why I like The Ring is that it's like, as you said, it takes the mythology and it makes it its own kind of.
Yeah, it just Americanizes it slightly, and
it's set in Seattle. Like the characters are all American, so it's not just like. I mean, wouldn't it be silly, Joe, if the film was still set in Japan, but you just made all the characters white Americans? I mean, that'd be silly, wouldn't it? So not only is Ju-on the Curse, the Curse 2, the sequel to Ju-on the Curse. Ju-on the Curse, Joe, isn't even the first fucking Ju-on movie.
No, you mentioned
there are two student films that the director made where it was basically they're only a few minutes long. But they're the first instance of that, and they have the same actress who played Kayako. But the interesting thing is that the name of one of those films is the number that is dialed to the son in The Curse, basically the brother. His girlfriend, the number that gets dialed to her when she's in the school, that's the same name as the film.
Yeah, I mean, there are even like, I know we haven't seen all of it, but even just watching The Curse and The Grudge, you can see where The Curse heavily leads into The Grudge in ways, and there's a lot. They are quite consistent in their idea, and everything that's there is.
Oh, for the first few films, it's way more consistent than the Ring franchise in both instances. It's just that the American reboot is worse. Not worse than Ju-on necessarily, but it's like, compare the Ring to the Grudge. Yeah. It's just it's night and day, because the Ring is so much more transformative. But yeah, the only clear way to identify this franchise is to name it the Ju-on franchise when you're talking about the Japanese stuff, and then the Grudge when you talk about the American stuff. But I understand how in certain instances, because it does that thing of there's a long stretches of time where it seems like nothing happens, but for that entire time, I felt like the films built tension. I feel like in the Grudge, sometimes it was not done as well, and sometimes it's just I love the sisters bit in The Grudge, where it's the first time we've seen that. Well, first time really that we've seen that someone's outside of the house but has come into contact with it, and it can still be killed. Like at her place of work, she gets haunted by Kayako, and then Kayako fucking drags her under her bed covers at home, and that's such a great visual as well. It's so good.
The Ju-on films didn't pull me in like the other two did. And it is partly just because of lower budget. Yeah. There's not as much going on in these films necessarily. I understand. No, yeah. I agree. It does. Sorry, every horror film needs the build of tension. It does need the plot, and there is stuff going on. But for me, I wasn't as interested in the Ju-on films as I wanted to be.
I think that singular narrative of Ring really helps that slow build, whereas in this one it is. I think that the obviously both of them are episodic, but I think that the episodic stuff in Ju-on is actually much better in what it's trying to portray with like mundane lives being affected by the supernatural incident. It kind of has that Kubrick-esque sense in the scenes in Ju-on where there are just long stretches of time where seemingly nothing happens, and I think that does. I think it doesn't help its case. I think in that respect, to people who are, off-put by a lot of the more obtuse stuff. And I completely understand where you're coming from. I do disagree, because I think that there is so much going on in The Grudge that especially with obviously with the plot, which I think we both can agree, there's so much there that's going on that you're trying to decipher. And then, at some point, the serial killer dad's fucking swinging a baby around in a bin bag, and on paper that sounds hilarious, but in the film I was disgusted and horrified. I think that the filmmaking in The Grudge, in Ju-on The Grudge, I think was much better, especially in terms of editing, because sometimes I felt like The Curse was edited a bit like a student film, but I think it's in look alone really. I think both of the films are very good. I don't think they're the sort of thing that necessarily I would recommend to everyone, but no. I mean, if you're willing to put in if you are willing to put in sort of the patience for it, I think they're good.
I didn't not enjoy them, but
I'm not
couldn't.
Trying to indicate
they lost me a little bit. So
yeah,
and whereas the concepts, ideas, and plot are all good, there were definitely just filmmaking, quality of life things that threw me off at times as well.
Well, I think the sound design in The Curse is unfortunately has not aged well.
Yeah, the sound design
it sounds like Hell's Kitchen, basically.
Yeah.
Whereas the sound design in The Grudge is
improved.
I think it's fantastic. Okay, well, the next film we're talking about is The Wailing. The Wailing is the only non-Japanese film that's on our list today, and it's also the only singular film that we're kind of talking about. So I guess hopefully it'll be a bit more streamlined.
It's also the most recent as well.
Yes, 2016. Whereas these ones are all late 90s, early 2000s. This one is a very recent horror film, and I think that's kind of a trend in that J-horror kind of fell off, whereas I guess K-horror.
Yeah.
South Korean horror has kind of been popping off a little bit more, because you have I think Bong Joon-ho, who directed Parasite, kind of started off with some horror films. I think he did. I can't remember what it's called, but I think it's like The Guest or something, or The Gift. The thing is, there's a lot of these films where it's like it's in that vein of and then you insert word. But The Wailing, is the longest film that we watched. It's the length of the Lord of the Rings film.
I know. I was surprised when I got. I'll be honest. I was like, I was really invested. This one was quite thrilling for me. It was the first one I watched out of all these, and I was really into it. But I got maybe 2 hours in, and I was like, oh, it's got to be coming up to the end, right? I looked at the timer, and I'm like, oh no, we still got like another hour to go.
You still have the third act to go. Yeah. There's so much going on in The Wailing. I think from the sounds of it, I think we both thoroughly enjoyed this.
Yeah, I don't think we don't need to go too much in depth with it, because I think it is just, I don't know.
I mean, basically, the most important thing to note about the plot is just that it goes in zigzagging directions, basically.
Yeah, it's very...
And like the main character, you are confused with him. You like the main character as well. That's another thing. I think this is my favorite protagonist out of the lot.
Yeah.
In that he's such a piece of shit.
Yeah.
I think is Junggu is or Jonggu is the main character's name, and he's a schlubby police officer with a modest sort of family home, and he's not really a competent like civil leader. He's just a guy who's like, he doesn't want to do anything. He's lazy. He's I watched a video on the film where somebody said that you could interpret like him embodying all 7 of the 7 deadly sins at one point.
No,
although the lust one is stretching, because it's like, well, he's like, he's having sex in a car, yes, with his wife, but
no, I mean, yeah, there's a lot because he flips back and forth where he's like, there are bits where he's trying to be, trying to be a good dad. He wants to help his daughter. He wants to do things.
There's just a transformation at one point where sort of in the middle he starts to get his shit together, because in the beginning portion of the film he's a goofy like pathetic weasel basically.
But he's still.
Whereas afterwards, it's really when he steps up and he tries to take care of his daughter, and that's when he takes action. And it's not necessarily that the action he takes is good; it's just that he's trying at this point.
Yeah,
and that's the thing is, the film it kind of jumps around with what it's about.
Yeah, I mean, you can still see in the beginning of the film, there's definitely a scene or two where he's like, you can see he cares about his daughter a lot.
Oh yeah, when I say that he's like a
doesn't
mess, it's like it's
do
not
anything about it until later.
He's more like a passive sort of like nobody. Yeah. He's not a bad person at all by any means. It's just he has flaws. He has like very serious character flaws, and that's what he has to overcome, and that's why it makes him relatable and what makes you root for him, because he is a good dad. He's a decent dad. He's not like a bad person. He's nice to people. He's just a bit cowardly and a bit sort of pathetic, basically. Yeah. And then as time goes on, he completely, slowly, but he does completely eviscerate that personality of his. Even though he might still be doubtful, he's always doubtful throughout the entire film. But his sense of actionability does it does increase. It does gets to the point where he does start taking risks with the gambles he makes and that.
But yeah, it does. Obviously, it follows him for the majority of the film. It's basically his. You don't really follow any of the other characters particularly, do you? Maybe the priest.
We cut away to a few people. Yeah.
You do cut away, but mostly it's just him and then the nephew priest guy. I think
the characters that we really have to that we're dealing with are Junggu, the Japanese man, the shaman, the priest who's the nephew of Junggu's friend, and also the mysterious woman. Basically, those are our characters. Those are our main characters. Obviously, there's Junggu's daughter.
Yeah, there's. I mean, this is the thing. There's a lot to cover in this, to be honest. But there is. Really, it's another one of those. There's rumors. There's stories of Japanese.
The whole thing is about mass hysteria, basically, because it. I mean, and as well, the type of film that it is, in terms of horror films, switches wildly. Because as well, there's moments of there's bits of this film where it's almost like Shaun of the Dead in how funny it is.
There's
so much going on.
I know. Towards the beginning, this film had me laughing because I was like, I can't, I can't tell if it's purposeful or not. But there are bits where that's just quite funny of how it's weird. It's weird how. Some of it's quite blatant in how there are bits in a few of these films, but this one in particular where it's just like, you expect build up to things to happen, but things just happened. Like, just like one of the zombified-ish people, one of the cursed people shows up just out of nowhere in a scene where you're not expecting it, and it's both, horror and also partially... To a point, comedy of how,
Are you talking about the bit with the rake?
The rake? I can't even remember now.
a bit. I can't. I'm not. I don't want to spoil it.
I know.
It's the bit when it's the bit where like 5 grown men are dealing with this.
No, it's not that bit I was
guy.
on about. But yeah, that is also another thing. But it is weird how it's just how sort of they come face to face with the horror quite frequently, and especially quite early in the film, whereas you expect build up, but the characters just kind of come across it and they're quite not casual about it, but it's like it's not. It's just weird. But it kind of works.
They try and simplify it to it's a medical issue or something like that. Even though they don't know the answer. It's like when they're like it was probably mushrooms or something. And it's like didn't the toxicity report come back and it said nothing? But it's like what else could it be? And they don't want to. But they want to keep like sort of faith or out of it completely.
No, I know.
It's like
and
they don't want to have to put their faith in anything.
And that's the whole thing throughout the film. It's the switching of should we trust the shaman guy because he's like and it's like no, and it's like my friend, his friend talking about rumors, and he's like I really believe this, and then as soon as something actually happens he's like no, I don't believe this, and then something else. It does flip. There's so much going on. It flips back and forth between so many different characters believing in different things, and like horror that is like actual horror, and then horror that's like that's nothing. And but I just found it really interesting how I think like early at the police station where like I think a naked woman shows up in the window or something, and it's like they were just joking about the rumor, and it's like you expect this to come up later. No, someone just appears in the window right there, and it's like I'm both laughing at how comical it is of them freaking out, but also like, it is quite horrifying. Well, and it's weird combination. It's a great. It was very thrilling, actually.
It's a great balance act that they're doing in the first sort of portion of the film, and then it does die out as time goes on, but it's still pretty present even into like the late film.
Yeah,
but yeah, and then like there's like things with the shaman. We might not have known this, but I again this is like from research I did afterwards. But apparently this is alleged that the shaman. All of the stuff he's doing in the film, like all the rituals, are like legitimate rituals. So it's like for us Westerners, seeing him dance around and like doing that might look like he's trying to scam them or whatever, but it's all legit.
No, this is when it did for a second. I was like, oh, this is not what you expect of a film like this. But then you think, well, no, because over in Asian cultures, and it is these, as you said, the whole rumors and stuff. Absolutely, and then you would think, this is the equivalent of an exorcism in the US, where it's like
in the West
banishing
like
a demon.
I think this is the key difference between the Asian horror we've looked at here, and I think just as a cultural thing, the general in terms of the famous stuff, the famous examples that we know of and that we're using here. There's a quite clearly a different philosophy with how horror and the elements surrounding horror are in Western society and Asian society. And obviously that's again I'm Western and Asian society is such a generalization, but obviously the general sort of theme I think that we've seen with these films is that. Basically, the it's not tangible. You can't really ever like understand it perfectly. Like throughout the Wailing, everyone is looking for answers, specific answers, and when they don't get those answers, they search for more. They can't like again. We said earlier about the faith thing. That is the entire sort of prime theme of this film. If there was a central theme that you could sort of identify, it's about what do you put your faith in, and can you learn to trust in things, and also just how how persuasive and how evasive faith can be. Like the spiritual solutions in a Western film would be probably like laughed at nowadays with a more atheist sort of approach to things, but in Asian society, I think there's still quite a prominent, especially like roots of Christianity in some bits, some areas of Asian countries. But obviously there's Buddhism as well. There's a lot of because as well martial arts and sort of and religion and spiritualism is all quite interlocked. Obviously, whether that should be the case is not something we're equipped to answer here, but basically it is just like, okay, well, the solution in America, especially in terms of like parody or like satire that we would probably jump to, is that, it's like, I don't think you could have had a film like Ghostbusters be as popular in an Asian market, because it would probably have been offensive.
Yeah.
And that's not to say that like that is the case, but
No, but they would see it differently than we would.
Even the idea of making that film in an Eastern setting, I just don't like.
No.
Again, it's like Ringu. It's like the opposite of that. It's like it's not technology dominating mysticism and spiritualism. It is the opposite happening. It is like sort of folklore, magic, and curses taking over technology. But in the Wailing, I suppose it's. I mean, there's so many. I think that some people might misread this film as an allegory against xenophobia, which it's not. Because obviously at the end, it's. Well, I suppose we'll get into spoilers now. At the end, it's revealed that the Japanese man is actually a demon.
Yeah.
And that I think some people might misread that as, oh, that's playing into the ideas of xenophobia, of like, well, they were right all along to be xenophobic and bigoted, but it's like, it's not really the point.
No.
Like, the point is that like he's the outsider, and they default to blaming him immediately because he's an outsider, and people spread stories. Again, it's like you were saying about the rumors. That's a whole thing with this film. It's just it's all hearsay, and by the end, it's like there's so much hearsay that. I mean, what is there left to believe? How do you decipher truth from lie?
But that's the one thing. As I said, this film's very, very good and very thrilling in the fact that even till the last minute, I'm like, I don't actually know who's good and who's bad yet. The shaman is questionable.
Well, yeah, it's more his demeanor when he's trying to bargain for money and stuff like that. Like he does seem like his priorities are not to help the innocent; it's just to make profit. I mean, I do think that how the film treats the Japanese man, I do feel like it's in a way where it's trying to make him into a red herring when he's not.
Yeah.
Because he is the target, but it's like when he's crying under that cliff piece, it's really effective. But then on rewatch, is that going to be effective anymore?
I know.
No.
It's like, cause
why he does that for? Does he do that for our benefit? Or,
I know. There are still questions, but I still found it very thrilling because in a first watch, it is. Oh, you never really know what's going on, and you still, even by the end of it, you don't know motives of like why does the bits of the film. It's like, why does the demon do this, and why does the woman do this, and it's like there are bits, and even the main character is questionable throughout the entire thing, but is very clear as to why for the most part.
Yeah.
But yeah, I found it was a very engrossing film, and I was hooked on that one. It was a very good one to start with for me. So
it feels like all of the holes you could poke in it. Yeah. Supposedly, I think that you can kind of hand wave them all, and that basically, I mean, I know you were saying like where it's like like all the motivations of the demon and why would he do this? It's like, well, I mean, the motivations of the demon is that he's evil and he wants to do evil things and he wants to, like toy around with people. Like he toys with the priest at the end. It's like it's like he's a serial killer. Like, so why he takes photos and stuff like that, and it just so happens that he's a demon too. It's like the whole, trying to find solutions and again, this plays into like the Western thing of like, we like rules in our horror films, and when we don't have rules in our horror films, they're usually quite bad in the West. Whereas in the East, like rules are more guidelines than anything,
An actual rules.
Yes, but Barbosa wrote the code for this. That was something that was very engaging about the film. I think is that you can relate to that situation. Even if you're not a parent, like I think there are plenty of people who have had a family member who's been sick or ill or something, even if it's not been like terminal. And there'll be people who have like put their faith in like spiritualism and religion, and the results of that stuff can vary and stuff like that. And it's, I mean, that end bit is just like, it's heartbreaking because as an audience member, I think at a certain point, obviously despite when the demon actually reveals himself, a little bit before that, once we see once the plot has been explained by the mysterious woman, that the thing that she has put on their house is a ward, like a trap, basically, and it's the exact same ward that Jung-gu finds in the beginning of the film. And if you remember that, you now go, oh my god, if he, like, that now you understand that she's been trying to help people from the very start, like everyone that this has happened to, or when she can. And it's just that no one can put their faith in someone who doesn't emote like a human. Like, she is more like sort of, you know, she's less human in how she outwardly expresses herself. Whereas the Japanese man has kind of managed to hide himself in humanity and place himself in that.
It is very interesting, and
there's so much to dissect with this one. I think that is one thing that differs between the Wailing and the Ring and Ju-on is that I think that's the benefit of most modern horrors, is I feel like we can talk about them more, especially as contemporaries, because we exist in the time where these films are, you know, are the sort of climate that these films are being made in, and that they're trying to reflect. So it speaks to us a lot more. Whereas, like, you know, especially with films that are 2 decades old at this point, like the Ring, you know, Ring and Ju-on, like there are bits of those films, both of them, that I watched, and I'm like, this would have been scary if I had been exposed to this earlier. But because it's been diluted through, especially the Hollywood machine of making horror movies, and I absolutely hate the vast majority of Hollywood horror movies.
Yeah, that is one thing. You can see clearly where, I mean, not only these films have their origins, but these films have influenced everything that's come after them, and it's like
it feels like the Western market's like 2 decades behind, where it's like in both Ring and Ju-on, there's a central theme about like parents and their children being involved in horror, and then it's like now it's like, because it used to be like, oh, it's the horny teenagers, and even up until like the 2010s, it's the horny teenagers that go and get killed off and you know, get involved in the spooky stuff. But nowadays you'll watch horror films, and the trend is actually that it's usually a single mother and her between 10 and 16-year-old son, basically, or daughter, and that is your film. Those are the characters in your film, and they try and mimic the things that like the Grudge does, where it's like there's minimalist horror or whatever, where it's like trying to build an atmosphere, but because it's, you know, it's factory garbage, it's just nonsense. It's like, okay, we can't scare somebody in this instance, let's just use a jump scare. Whereas like in these films, like that final jump scare in Ju-on the Grudge, like I was like shivering. Because of the sound design as well. The death rattle is such a amazing sound. But there's a reason why I was trying to mimic it at the beginning.
Yeah.
And J-horror is I think that one apparently has been quite dead for a while, because the you know, the boom really was around the time that we were born. So whereas Korean movies seem to be the ones that sort
picking
of
up in recent times.
Yeah, and just in general, with, you know, it doesn't even have to be horror. I guess we should get into the final thoughts.
Yeah, finish her up.
You're doing.
Well, I've already, you know, given my opinions. Really, again, I'm not. I don't want to rate everything.
Should we just summarize? So first off, let's do Ringu. How do you feel about it?
I already loved the Ring before, but watching Ring, the Japanese one, I love both of them. They're very good. Again, I've already said everything about them, but I don't know what I'd rate them particularly. Maybe let's go about 7 out of 10 for those ones.
Yeah. Yeah, basically, I mean, I mirror what you've said, just basically in the opposite direction. I watched Ringu first when we were sort of doing preparation for this. I watched The Ring, you know, after. I really like them both. I really love them both. I think I'll probably look more fondly on Ringu.
Yeah.
But The Ring, I think it's like the Evil Dead remake. It's a horror reboot that actually succeeds and actually manages to be transformative. I think it's better than the Evil Dead remake, and that the characters in that kind of suck. But yeah, I thoroughly agree. I thoroughly agree. I agree. I enjoyed. I think I'm gonna plug Ringu at about an 8 for me, and I'm going to put The Ring at a 7.5. That extra 5, like that extra 0.5, that is my enjoyment factor personally, rather than anything critical.
I would agree. As I said earlier, I slightly preferred the Japanese one anyway.
Yeah.
I just wanted to rate them together just to make it easier. But yeah, I'd probably rate Ringu slightly higher. And again, I'm not going to be... these ratings are really rough.
So yeah, I guess we'll jump to Ju-on then. So Ju-on the Curse and Ju-on the Grudge. How are you feeling, Joe?
Well, again, I've already said, they didn't hook me as much as I wanted. Again, I was like, oh, The Grudge. I thought I'd seen bits before. I don't know of which one, though. Yeah. And I'm like, I did like bits of it. The concept, the idea, the horror that was there was good. But it just didn't hook me. I found, again, the production quality was just a bit... Especially for The Curse, there were bits that I was like, I can't... These cat noises did not fit. Just saying. But there were definitely production things that were like this. If they had the budget for it, just a little bit more, I was like, they could make it, they could improve it and make it just easier for me.
Do you feel like the Grudge does that to a degree?
Well, I think the production quality went up, but as you said, the plot gets a bit messier. And there were absolutely in the Grudge there were scenes where something happened and then it cut to a next scene, and I'm like, but I didn't quite understand what just happened, and they never explained. And I'm like, at least the first film they didn't need to explain. The second film I was a bit more lost in what was actually going on, so I wanted to enjoy them, but I didn't enjoy them as much as...
Or are you able to give your ratings?
I can give a rough rating for those. Let's say The Curse... Really, it has to be like a 3.5 out of 10.
Wow.
I couldn't.
Hey man, if you didn't enjoy them, then that's
like the concept.
That wow it's not disrespectful. I'm just a bit surprised because obviously it contrasts with me.
No, it's again. I'm trying to think because I'm like, oh, then there's this bit where I'm like, that's why I'm saying my ratings are really rough. They could jump about all over the place right now. Like, let's say 4 for The Curse, because there are bits that are very good in that. But again, I just didn't get hooked on these ones as much as I wanted to.
Okay.
And The Grudge, probably also a 4.
Okay, you've given your ratings. I'm going to get into my thoughts properly here, just very quick. Okay. I thoroughly enjoyed The Curse and The Grudge. I can understand where you're coming from. I've already said that I don't agree with it when it comes to my perspective on it. Again, we're in a respectful environment here where I'm not going to slate what you said because I can completely understand where you're coming from. In that, again, like I feel like if I got you to watch Twin Peaks, there would be a similar thing occasionally where you'd be like, "Why is there this short guy in a red room?" And I'd be like, "Just got to stick with it."
No, this is the thing. I'm fine with Cryptic. It's just I feel like I would need to rewatch both of them, like in a more relaxed. Because again, there's a lot of films to watch recently.
I mean, I think this might be a vibe check moment for us both. I think in that I thought to begin with when I was watching The Curse, like, oh, this is going to be boring because of how it worked. But eventually, like, it pulled me in, and I didn't feel like it was boring whatsoever. I felt like both of them were very engaging. I think, as I said, there are bits of The Grudge where I feel like because of that extra runtime and the bit more stuff going on, it does get a bit more sort of a bit too full. But I don't mind the low budget of The Curse. I think The Curse does a great job, and I think that considering the sort of crappy effects, the low resolution of the VHS actually makes it look like quite decent and quite scary. I think the atmosphere of The Curse, with regard to how it looks, is actually it has that sort of VHS quality to it, in that you'd never know quite what you're looking at, which isn't the best argument, but I mean, put it this way, I think even if you were able to get an upscaled version, I still think The Curse would be worse. I mean, I do think that although it had the production level of a student film with a bit extra on it, I do think that it is worth a general viewer's watching. But yeah, the Curse is I think I'm gonna put the Curse at I'm gonna put it a little bit higher than The Ring. I think for me, I'm gonna put it at a 7.7 for me. Because it's, and the reason I put it in between is because I don't think I like it less than The Ring, but I definitely don't think I like it more than Ringu. I felt like it segmented itself off very well. The sound design in the first film isn't fantastic, but I do think that the visuals, although like some of the special effects are a bit dated, like because they were used sparingly. Like that image of the girl without the jaw is I love it. It's so fantastic to me. And I think this is one thing where like I can look back, and this is not to say that you can't, by the way, but I definitely feel like I can look back on like older movies and have like some most like times where it's like, oh, those special effects are a bit dated or whatever. It's like I feel like that doesn't. I'm never taken out of the movie unless it's really bad. But again, that's a vibe check thing there, I think, where it's like, I mean, we've talked about this with like how we feel about. I mean, this is offhanded how we feel about Star Wars movies and that. And bam, I did it, bitch. But and then The Grudge, I think that there are improvements from The Curse in that it expands on the lore, in that now there are options, your relatives or loved ones from the grave can save your soul, and there are. I think that although there's a bit just a little bit too much. I think that I followed it quite well up until the end, and I gotta be honest. I think it conveyed itself very well, and I think that the budget and the filmmaking style and techniques, the editing, I thought that The Grudge was a massive technical improvement on The Curse, and I think that, if I'm being honest, despite I guess how I prefer the first one, I think that The Grudge is probably on an objective scale better. I'm not going to rate it better, but I do think that it's worth a damn lot, and I can understand. Again, it's like it is one of those films though where I can totally understand if somebody's put off by it, but I would thoroughly recommend both The Curse and The Grudge, especially to your cinephile audience. Maybe not your average viewer, but I guess it depends on what you like. But yeah, I'm gonna plug The Grudge in at a. I'm gonna give it a solid 7. I'm gonna give it a solid 7. The Wailing, Joe.
The Wailing, last one. It's definitely my favourite one of the bunch that we watched, and yeah, there's a lot going on with it, but I'd probably rate it about 8.5.
Yeah.
But
okay.
I'm always tempted to put it higher. I don't want to put it much lower than 8.
This is one where I think we're both quite. We feel quite similar on it.
Yeah. That's all I have to say on it. It's just very, very highly recommend The Wailing, though.
Yeah. Yeah. No. Yeah. It's a film that's. I think it's kind of approaching like masterpiece. I think it's fantastic. I'm going to give it a 9. Just because I don't know. I definitely don't think at the moment I could pick a favorite out of the ones we watched. I enjoyed all of these thoroughly. Yeah. Like I really loved watching all of these films. But The Wailing, I think that its ambiguities are a strong suit when they are there, and when it tries to explain stuff, it does it enough that you always get what's going on in The Wailing. It's like you say, things happen, but you still understand what's going on, and when decisions are made and key things happen, the stakes are always there. And Jonggu's daughter will die if he doesn't succeed, and his family might also die if he doesn't succeed.
No, I found it very thrilling. So
yes, I think objectively it's the best film on the list. It's got us,
possibly.
Yeah. Well, in terms of our ratings, from what we're doing it right now, it's a 9 from me. The Wailing is fantastic. I think that everyone should check out The Wailing. Although be careful, because it does have a lot of disturbing stuff in it. So be warned.
Well, yeah. I mean, it's to be expected with most horror, but The Wailing is very it's up there. So.
Yeah. Talk about a downer ending.
But yeah, thanks.
But yeah, this
everyone. Yeah.
Sorry.
All right.
We've got to the point now where we're like this has been like a marathon. Like we've run to the end, and it's like, oh god, we're finally there. And this is because obviously we haven't done this sort of thing in a while, where we cover multiple movies in one episode. But it's been fun to revisit it, and hopefully things should flow a bit better next time.
But anyway,
yeah. I've been Jack.
I've been Joe.
There we go. And we've been 2MoreTakes.
No, we don't.
Woo!
That's not a thing we do. But
We're
okay.
horror. It's horror month. We're getting some gimmicks.
Spooky.
Spookiness. We're hitting stop on record. Goodbye, everyone.
Bye.